Welcome to Policy Matters. Our goal is to keep you informed on the upcoming election, how it affects you, and why it matters. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Merrifield Wilson. President Biden recently received criticism after appearing to call Trump supporters garbage while condemning a comedian's offensive remarks about Puerto Rico at a Trump rally.
Donald Trump has no character. He doesn't give a damn about the Latino community. He's failed businessman. He only cares about the billionaire friends he has and accumulating wealth for those at the top. He says immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. Give me a break. He wants to do away with the birthright citizenship. Who the hell has said that in the last 100 years? And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable, and it's un-American. It's totally contrary to everything we've done.
Biden clarified that his comment was aimed solely at the derogatory rhetoric rather than Trump supporters as a whole. Former President Donald Trump later showed up to a rally in Wisconsin dressed as a sanitation worker, proclaiming that the President Biden's comments were directly attached to Vice President Kamala Harris and her opinion. Let's take a look.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden. And I have to begin by saying 250 million Americans are not garbage. This week, Kamala has been comparing her political opponents to the most evil mass murderers in history. And now, speaking on a call for her campaign last night, crooked Joe Biden finally said what he and Kamala really think of our supporters. He called them garbage. No way. No way.
Vice President Harris distanced herself from Biden's phrasing, emphasizing her commitment to finding common ground. At the same time, Trump framed the backlash as an attack on patriotic Americans, further intensifying the discourse amid the election season. Today is Election Day and the last day to cast your ballot. According to the University of Florida Election Lab, more than 73 million Americans voted early this election. But what information do we have to tell ourselves? Of the states that provide party affiliation of their early voters, Democrats hold a slight advantage with around 80,000 more affiliated early voters. There's a noticeable gap with gender, with women having 11% more early voters than men. It also appears that older voters tend to vote earlier than younger voters, with voters aged 18 and 40, only 24% of total of early voters. However, these indicators can only let us know so much before the actual election results. We can look at the trends and make assumptions, but until we have the information tonight, we will need to wait for the outcome of this year's presidential election. A new campaign ad for Vice President Kamala Harris, voiced by Julia Roberts and produced by Vote Common Good, encourages women to vote independently, even if their husbands support Donald Trump. Let's take a look at this ad.
Your turn, honey.
In the one place in America where women still have a right to choose. You can vote any way you want. And no one will ever know.
Did you make the right choice?
Sure did, honey.
Remember, what happens in the booth stays in the booth. Vote Harris Walls. Vote Common.
The ad subtly references abortion rights, a significant issue in a race where Harris leads among female voters and Trump among male voters. In the ad, a woman winks at another female voter after casting her ballot for Harris, keeping her choice private from her husband. The ad sparked criticism from Republicans, with some, including Fox host Jesse Waters and conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, equating a wife secretly voting for Harris to infidelity. Kirk expressed distaste, claiming it undermines a husband's efforts to support his family. As we approach another pivotal election, let's take a look back at how these nights have evolved over the years, shaping the way we experience democracy. The tradition of election nights dates back to the early 19th century. In the first presidential election of 1788, results were communicated slowly, often taking days or even weeks to arrive due to the limited communication technology. Votes were counted by hand, and news traveled by horse and messenger. The concept of a national election night didn't truly exist. The 1950s ushered in the modern American presidency, and by that time, television had emerged as the dominant medium. CBS News anchor Walter Cronkite famously delivered results, bringing a new level of professionalism and authority to election night coverage. Viewers were glued to their screens, captivated by the live visuals and the drama unfolding. As technology continues to advance, though, so too does election coverage. The 2000 election, a particularly contentious battle between George W. Bush and Al Gore, showcased the importance of real-time data and graphics. The infamous Florida recount and the Supreme Court's decision highlighted the critical role of the media in informing the public about the electoral process and its complexities. Today, election nights are a spectacle of modern media. With multiple networks competing for viewers, results are broadcast live across various platforms, including social media. Interactive maps, instant polling data, and expert analysis have all become integral to the experience, allowing voters to engage in real-time discussions. Moreover, the accessibility of information has changed the landscape. Voters can follow candidates on their smartphones, engaging with the electoral process like never before. However, this also raises concerns about misinformation and the pressure for rapid reporting, which can sometimes lead to premature calls of victory. As we prepare for this upcoming election night, we reflect on how far we've come. From slow, horse-drawn news to instant updates at our fingertips, election night continues to evolve, shaping the way we understand and participate in our democracy. Coming up next, the Electoral College, what it is and why you should know it, next on Policy Matters.
Good morning, Greyhounds, and welcome back to your Wednesday show. We have some very exciting things to talk about with our very special guest.
So what do you find unique about UND, and what kind of pulled you here?
What are you doing?
Watching Good Morning Greyhounds every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m.
For this week's Policy Spotlight, we're diving into a cornerstone of American democracy, the Electoral College. It's quite possible that the election will be decided by whichever candidate can secure a majority of the Electoral College votes in order to win, and it may not be decided for several days. The Electoral College was established in 1787 during the Constitutional Convention. The Founding Fathers faced a dilemma: how to balance the influence of the populous states with that of the smaller ones in presidential elections. Their solution? A system where each state has a set number of electors based on its congressional representation, equal to its senators and representatives in Congress. Today, there are 538 electors in total, and a candidate needs a majority, at least 270, to win the presidency. Each state's number of electors ranges from 3 for the least populous states to 55 for California, the most populous state on election night. On election night, voters across the nation will cast their ballots not directly for their preferred presidential candidate, but for a slate of electors pledged to that candidate. Once the votes are tallied, the winning candidate in each state's popular vote typically receives all of that state's Electoral College votes, a practice known as winner takes all, used by most states. This system means that winning a state by even a small margin can yield the same number of electoral votes as winning the state by a large margin, which can lead to scenarios where a candidate wins the presidency without winning the popular vote. This phenomenon has happened in the elections of 1824, 1876, 1888, 2000, and most recently, the 2016 election. The Electoral College has sparked considerable debate over the years. Critics argue it undermines some of the principles of one person, one vote, disproportionately amplifying the voices of voters in small states while diminishing the influence of those in larger states. Proponents contend that it protects the interests of the small states and encourages candidates to campaign nationwide rather than just focusing on populous urban areas. Experts suggest that any change to the system would require a constitutional amendment, a challenging and complex process. Despite its controversies, the Electoral College remains entrenched in the American political landscape. Joining me now is political scientist major and co-host Levi Alt. Levi, we were just talking about the Electoral College. I know it's very controversial and
Not at all, Professor.
No, not at all. Everyone loves
loves
it,
it.
right? It's very popular. But I wanted to start with your thoughts in the division of the Electoral College versus the popular vote.
Yeah.
Generally, like as a college student, as a
Yeah.
political science student who pays a lot of attention to this,
Yeah.
how do you see the Electoral College playing out here in 2024?
So I'll say this: if I was in a swing state, I would love it. Oh my goodness, I would have all the coverage. The candidates would be catering to me. I'd be an undecided voter, and I'd be like, I don't really know what I want. But yeah, I think the Electoral College, obviously, like as you said, it's so ingrained in our system, and it would require a constitutional amendment to change it. So I don't really see it going anywhere except for the what's the one initiative? It's like the national popular vote.
Yes, to eliminate the Electoral College so that it would only be the popular vote that decides.
Yes, and that would require a majority of Electoral College vote states, like above 270 essentially states, to then grant their electors to the winner of the popular vote, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, other than that, which would be really difficult because states, especially conservative states, will realize that they would be at a disadvantage, at least at this period in time. But yeah, I think I think the Electoral College, especially non-swing states, could lead to voter apathy, where maybe somebody who is a liberal in a conservative state and vice versa may feel like, especially on the national election, like their voice or their vote doesn't really matter all that much. Like as a college student here in Indiana, and who leans a little bit more to the liberal bend, I really don't think that our vote really matters all that much. So.
I feel like it's really hard because that apathy you mentioned is so real at the presidential level. And as a political scientist, I always want to say, yes, but there's a Senate race, there's a gubernatorial race, there are all these state level races. But I recognize with the nationalization of politics right now, I think there's an emphasis on those federal issues. And of course, it's a presidential election cycle. I have a little sticker that I think is just the funniest thing ever, and it says, "I wasted my vote in a non-swing state today."
Oh my goodness,
and I think people in Indiana could certainly relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it makes me wonder too, one of the arguments against relying just on the popular vote is that those states like California with 55 electoral college votes, right? But obviously a large population, that's why they have so many votes. Right, disproportionately might have a larger say. And I kind of wonder in terms of the popular vote, this was the founding fathers kept from insulating themselves from public decisions.
The popular whims of the people.
Yes,
right,
like Plato, the fear of the people, right? The fear of the demos.
Exactly, the
so
ship of Theseus,
most of the time, the Electoral College and the popular vote align, so it doesn't necessarily matter that there's a divergence. I am curious here, I've seen predictions that show an outcome where Harris wins the popular vote, but Trump wins the Electoral College. It could be a 2016 version all over again in terms of partisanship.
Even. And I feel like without a reason why this is really, I think, catapulted for the past, 20, 25 odd years since the 2000 election is because we've had it, potentially, and especially if Harris wins the popular vote this time around and Trump wins the Electoral College, it'll be the third time since the turn of the century. And I feel like a lot of people would be like, oh my goodness, we've, how have we come up with a system that is rewarding the person who gets less votes? And back to your point where we mentioned earlier about the sanctity of one person, one vote, if we are time and time again electing somebody who is frequently not getting a plurality of votes, then we might have maybe there's something gone awry with our system. And the founding fathers, maybe with their perfect wisdom, I think it makes a lot of sense, though. I will say with the Electoral College, especially with how rooted our sense of federalism is, we want to empower states, but does that outweigh small d democracy, right? We want to value states' rights at the expense of voters from across the country, right?
Yeah, and if you think of like Wyoming or Montana, those states have a larger say through the Electoral College than they would necessarily in terms of the popular vote. I think the point you make is a really good one. In my lifetime, and I couldn't vote in the 2000 election, but in my lifetime, right, we've had 3 times where the Electoral College vote has been impactful. And I think it's that divergence. When it's the same as the popular vote, we don't even think about it. When I grew up hearing about it, it was like, oh, it's just this institution that confirms who the president is, but it's the popular vote's different. But when we see so many times now where it feels like our elections are more close, right? They're more competitive, and so you have that kind of focus and that emphasis. You know, in terms of voter apathy, do you think it might have the opposite impact on voters in, let's say, Pennsylvania, 19 electoral college votes, and arguably the most swing state this election cycle? Do you think that they feel overwhelmed, quite frankly, by all the attention on their state?
I could imagine, where, you know, constant media bombardment, not just, you know, through commercial ads, but campaign visits. Time and time again, I think that candidates, they're so heavily focused on, and that, again, a little bit goes back to the point of, you know, in a system that we did use as popular vote, places like California or Texas, the argument goes, would be disproportionate in their effect. But now I feel like the same argument could be made about Pennsylvania, right? That they play a disproportional effect on the election at large. Same thing with in the primary places like Iowa and New Hampshire. How comes they get to decide the candidates for all of us? Same thing with Pennsylvania or Michigan. They play an outsized role already. So if our concern is that smaller places will be drowned out, you know, we talk about the flyover country. Did Trump or Harris, either one of them, visit maybe like Montana, or they might have visited Montana maybe, but visit, you know, a solid red state like Indiana? Like, I don't think Trump or Harris has visited Indiana. I would have loved them to, but there's just no political incentive for them to do so. And so, Yeah,
well, it seems like in addition to electoral college problems, we have problems with federalism and so many other issues. We've prepared for this election all semester. Talking to locals in our community and students on campus, reporter Kendall Pearson had a chance to go out yesterday and get some last opinions on the 2024 presidential election. Let's take a look.
Okay, have you voted yet for this election cycle?
Yeah, I voted early.
Okay, do you mind telling me who you voted for?
I voted for Kamala.
Quite frankly, I have voted. Very good vote. Some people told me it was the best vote. They said very good vote.
No, I will tomorrow.
Not yet. I plan on going like Tuesday.
No, but I'm going tonight.
No.
And who do you think is going to win this election cycle?
It might be Kamala.
Why do you think that?
Just by the people like in our age group, they're going more for her. That's what I've noticed.
And who do you think is going to win?
I'm going to say Kamala, too. I think she's going to get the most votes, and just like what I've been hearing, too, even though Indiana like a red state.
Just from media popularity, I think Kamala is probably going to win.
I think it's honestly a toss-up. Like, I can't make a prediction, to be completely honest.
Quite frankly, I think you look at the polls, and I'm dominating in the polls. You look at everybody, and they're saying, we want Donald, we love you, Donald, and I'm going to win very easily.
Okay, thank you.
So, Levi, was that surprising as we see students? It feels like they're pretty divided. And as we talked about the Electoral College, that feels very accurate to the nation as a whole.
Oh, yeah. I think the feeling here on campus pretty much accurately depicts the feeling across the nation. I'm a little bit, a little bit intriguing because we know that those with a college degree are more likely to support Democrats. So maybe that's an indicator that maybe Trump is pulling away, especially white college educators. They're trying, or white college men, that the Trump campaign is trying to reach an olive branch out to them and reach out to that demographic. So maybe that's indicative of that. What do you think, Professor?
Well, I'll tell you, I asked my students in class to vote for who they thought would win the election. And you know, you're in one of my courses. The one class that I have that leans liberal, probably not surprising, thought Harris would win. And then the two classes I have that lean conservative disagreed and thought it'd be Donald Trump. So I think there is somewhat of a self-selection effect. And of course, I was asking their predictions, but likely they were also sharing who they wanted to win and who they were casting a ballot for if in fact they were voting.
Trying to manifest it one way or the other.
And I can understand that kind of positivity.
Yes.
What do you think the likelihood is that we'll know about the election this week? I'm sure it won't be tonight. I don't feel like it'll necessarily even be by this week. As I was thinking back in 2020, I don't think it was officially called by AP until Saturday. Right? And I remember in 2000, again, I couldn't vote yet, but that wasn't decided until December. I was in middle school and we kept waiting. It was a very weird feeling to not know who the next president would be.
Process, right?
It was, and that was one that went to the Supreme Court. So what do we think? What is our feeling for 2024?
Hopefully not a 2000 level. Knock on wood on that one. So I think it really depends. Like, I feel like there could be a scenario, all right, where we do know the results come election night, but that would require there to be, I think, an overwhelmingly, the polls would have to be way off. You know, either Trump or Harris has a major poll ahead, and the polls are just inaccurate. Maybe they underperform Trump, like they did in 2020, 2016, or they underperform Democrats, like they did in 2022, and then the polls are just inaccurate, right? Or what happened in 2020, where we have to wait maybe a week, maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit shorter and stuff. But in the most critical swing state, in the state of Pennsylvania, they're not allowed to start counting their mail-in ballots until 7 a.m. on election day, right?
Yes, that's correct.
That's going to take them a while to count all those ballots, and likely people have said before that whoever wins both campaigns have their election route through Pennsylvania. So yeah.
Well, it's only 19 of the 270 electoral college votes, but I agree. I think Pennsylvania is going to be huge this election cycle. We want to thank you for joining us. Tune in to UND TV on YouTube tonight with live election coverage starting at 6:30. I'm Dr. Laura Merrifield Wilson.
And I'm Levi Alt.